Hello, I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for The Verdict. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunlevy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett, and this man is not only my co-host, he is one of Oklahoma's top legal experts, Kent Myers. So once again, we're going to discuss Enron.
Second show on Enron, different focus though. We're not going to repeat what we did last time. Well, what we're going to talk about today is the effect of the Enron debacle on accountants and the accounting profession. Certainly the accountants for Enron are getting a lot of publicity. And what they did or did not do, and as to bring up an old saying, what they knew and when did they know it. The lessons of Enron are many. I think nowhere will it have a greater impact, however, than how accountants in Oklahoma City, in Tulsa, in the state of Oklahoma do business with clients hereafter, once the regulatory agencies are finished. I want to bring up a graphic that is portions of a letter from Sharon Watkins of Enron to Ken Lay, the chairman of Enron. Rather amazing things, and note the date, August 15th, 2001. Enron didn't go into bankruptcy until December of 2001, but this is what an officer said to her chairman. It's an elaborate accounting hoax. My concern is that the footnotes, meaning the financial statement footnotes, don't adequately explain the transactions. I know it would be devastating to all of us, but I wish we would get caught. We're such a crooked company. Thanks for the graphic. Rather amazing quotes coming to the chairman of the board of the company Enron. The principal complaint here is how the accounting is being handled, both internally and presumably externally. It should be an interesting subject today.
Well, I think everyone realizes that large companies like Enron move money back and forth all the time, and they assume that someone's watching after the money. Today, maybe we'll find out whether or not we should assume that.
That's right.
We'll be right back. This is The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an allied artist.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, who's going to introduce our guests.
We are pleased to have two guests today that can help us out understanding the accounting problems, the auditing role that was very important in the Enron controversy, still is important today. On my right is a repeat visitor guest to The Verdict, Jim Holloman, my partner of many years. Jim is a shareholder and director at Crowe and Dunlevy, practices in taxation and business law, with particular emphasis in the employee benefits law as well as other areas. And he also has been a CPA for 30-some years. He doesn't practice accounting, but he has been a certified public accountant for 31 years. And glad you're back, Jim. Thanks for being courageous enough to come back.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Ken.
On my left is a new visitor to The Verdict, but I hope not his last appearance, Dr. Chris Knapp, a professor, John E. Mertes Professor of Accounting at the University of Oklahoma. And Chris has another distinction, and I'd like to call up a graphic now to show the book he's authored, Contemporary Auditing, 4th edition. The significance of this book, Mick and Jim, is that this book is used by more colleges and universities, some 500 universities across the country, and it deals with auditing failure. So we really have a truly nationwide authority on auditing and how it ought to be done with us. Chris got his PhD from the University of Oklahoma and has been at Oklahoma the last 14 years. Chris or Dr. Knapp, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I want to direct the first question to you, if I may. What is an accounting firm's responsibility in an auditing role when they are auditors to a corporation? What is the responsibility, and to whom does the responsibility run?
Primary responsibility of the independent auditor is to analyze their client's financial statements, to make sure that those financial statements accurately depict their financial condition, operating results, their assets, their liabilities. That obligation runs primarily to the public. The Supreme Court a few years ago made that very clear. The responsibility of independent auditors is primarily to the public, investors, creditors, bankers, parties of that type.
Does a public company have a different responsibility than a private company from an accounting perspective?
Well, both types of companies have a responsibility to accurately report their financial results. The public companies, of course, have a responsibility to a much wider set of individuals and agencies and parties. But I would say, no, generally both companies, both types of companies have a responsibility to report honestly. That's the bottom line.
In a couple of sentences, tell us what the Powers Report is. Who did it, and when was it done, and what generally does it deal with?
The Powers Report was a investigative report that was carried out by 3 individuals. One of the individuals, as I recall, was actually a member of the Enron board while most of this situation was developing, and then the other 2 individuals, including Powers, who I believe, Jim, you may correct me here, I believe he was a law professor.
He's the dean of the University of Texas School
University
of Law.
of Texas Law School. In short, that report was I guess you might say, an autopsy of this debacle, with a particular focus on the accounting and financial reporting issues, on Anderson's role in this developing situation.
Well, let me pull up a graphic, if I may, on an excerpt from the Powers Report. Page 202, and quote, "The evidence suggests Anderson accountants did not function as an effective check on the disclosure approach taken by the company." What does that effective check on the disclosure approach mean to you? What's Powers saying here?
Well, I think that the Powers Report is saying that Anderson uncovered some very problematic events and circumstances relating to Enron's financial health. They debated these situations internally. At some point, actually, they considered resigning from the engagement because of the problematic nature of these events. And yet, in the final analysis, they decided to go ahead and remain as the auditor of the company and not resign or divulge some of this information to the public.
A lot of scrutiny is being placed on Anderson now and on accountants generally. Tell our viewers who, if anyone, regulates the practice of accounting, both in-state and out-of-state.
Well, like every profession, the accounting profession is regulated primarily at the state level. We have a state board of public accountancy which issues CPA certificates, which sanctions CPAs for violating professional rules of conduct. We also have several other regulatory bodies, self-regulatory bodies. For instance, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has some role in overseeing auditors and accountants. But the primary agency is the State Board of Public Accountancy, because that's the agency that can so-called pull your permit to practice or throw you out of the practice of public accounting.
I've heard it said that the accountants, like lawyers, are engaged in a self-regulating profession. Is that true, and what's that mean?
Well, yes, we have several self-regulatory bodies. For instance, the rulemaking authorities, Kent, in accounting are primarily sponsored by the accounting profession. The Financial Accounting Standards Board, the Auditing Standards Board, essentially operated by the accounting profession. And in fact, that's one of the problems I think that has arisen from this situation. Many parties believe that that's not probably the best structure, that we need more input from parties external to the profession.
Jim, let me change the subject just a minute. You've been in the business world a lot. What kind of pressure can a large client like Enron put on an auditing firm to resolve the close accounting questions in their favor? Just in a minute or so, tell us about that.
Well, of course, the accounting profession, as does the legal profession, have relationships with their clients that they treasure and they want to do well. And they want to exercise good professional judgment.
And they have loyalty.
And they have loyalty to those clients. When a client comes in and proposes something that the professional accountant deems inappropriate, it seems to me that the accountant is really put in a difficult spot, and one that must help analyze the transaction and then help analyze the decision of whether or not that transaction is actually entered into.
Let me jump in here and get us to a break. We're discussing Enron, the bankruptcy, and how it might affect Oklahoma. I'm Mick Cornett. Kent Myers and I will be right back with our special guest.
A videotape cannot teach our children to swim. A video game cannot capture the warmth of a campfire. And no TV show nor movie can help a child reach out to make a friend. But a campfire camp can show kids a world of experience they've never known before. For at Campfire, life is not something to be watched, it's something to be lived. The first fire we light is the fire within. Campfire, boys and girls.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education balanced with dedication to community and service makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Yesterday was plain awful.
You can say that again. On Broadway is Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company.
Bringing our daughter here was one of the smartest things we've ever done.
I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of confidence. They helped me develop talents I never knew I had.
And it's fun.
On Broadway, Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company. Now enrolling in Edmond. Call 330-CAST. That's 330-2278.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, Is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're back on The Verdict discussing Enron and the effects of its bankruptcy. We are joined by Dr. Chris Knapp and Jim Holloman. Kent, where are we here?
I want to ask Dr. Knapp a question. I see the term independent auditor used a lot. What does the term independent mean, and why is it important?
Kent, independence is often referred to as the cornerstone of the auditing profession. It's really why it exists. Management, corporate executives have an incentive to present their company's financial condition as positively as possible, to maintain the stock price, to increase their compensation through incentive compensation programs. So we need an outside or independent party to come in and look at those financial statements and make sure that they accurately portray given companies' financial operating results, financial condition. This responsibility was given to the auditing profession way back in 1933 with the passage of the Security Acts. We had, of course, the major problems with the stock market scandals and the collapse of the stock market in 1929. And so to remedy that situation, this was one thing that Congress did, was to establish the independent audit function.
Jim, this brings up a question I'd like to direct to you as one in the marketplace every day. I read that Arthur Andersen was presenting both auditing and accounting functions to the company and at the same time selling them consulting services. How does one reconcile a consultant on the one hand saying, why don't you structure your business this way, why don't you do this, that, and the other, and then with the other hand or the other part of the business service trying to view that independently and whether that's okay or not.
Yes,
is there any inconsistency there?
Definitely there is an inherent conflict in trying to do both of those functions on the same transaction.
Is it commonly done?
It is commonly done. Some firms and some institutions, and not the accounting profession solely, will actually place or build what's called a Chinese wall between these two different functions, so the parties on each side do not have knowledge of what's going on the other side.
So the consulting side doesn't know what the auditing's doing, and vice versa.
But still, I believe that there can be a mesh of those functions together, as long as the people who are involved in the auditing function that may also be consulting are doing it knowing that they believe the transactions that they're going to recommend and be involved in participation of actually have true economic substance and do reflect the true, clear financial conditions of the company.
Let me stay with you just for another minute on this subject. Is it typical, as you understand it, in the accounting profession to have this Chinese wall between consulting and auditing?
In some firms they have them, in some they do not.
So it's mixed?
Yes.
Dr. Knapp, assume you have a crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen to Arthur Andersen when this thing's all over and done?
Well, I've been involved in several of these large cases, and it's very hard to predict.
So which ones have you been involved in?
Well, I've testified in several cases. I'd prefer not to actually mention some of those cases.
Your secret is safe with our viewers, but go ahead.
It's hard to predict.
Well, excuse me, Dr. Knapp, there are 2 or 3 cases that are examples in your textbook.
Well, among the cases I've written up, of course I haven't testified in the cases I've written up, but Lincoln Savings and Loan, for instance, ESM Government Securities, but in most of those cases have been very, let's say, unfavorable outcomes for the firms. And I would expect that there will certainly be some negative consequences for Andersen as a result of this. One analyst has suggested that Andersen's legal exposure is somewhere in the range of $10 to $20 billion in this particular case, which is enormous. The firm has a very large capital. We don't know exactly what that is, but it's estimated to be in the billions of dollars. But certainly the exposure in this case far outweighs their equity.
Now, many of the large firms in recent years have merged, and Andersen apparently has resisted the temptation to merge with other firms. Would you suggest that these problems might precipitate a merger?
It could precipitate a merger. It's possible. Some parties have suggested that it may actually result in the liquidation of the firm. We have had some major firms liquidated as a result of litigation crisis such as this. The firm of Laventhal and Horvath, which was involved with the PTL scandal involving the Baker family. That's certainly one possible outcome.
Jim, what's likely to happen to the accounting profession as such and the practice of accounting by accountants? Is that likely to change?
Well, there may be many regulatory changes that we see. There may be outside regulators, not just self-regulators, and particularly those that audit and certify statements of publicly traded companies. There may be actions that the accountants will do on their own. They may engage in more due diligence in areas where there's suspicious activity. They may desire to do that on a more frequent basis than just the annual audit report. They may actually commence engaging in them before each quarterly statement is reviewed. And then if circumstances arise that the accountant believes on those due diligence examinations do not properly reflect the financial condition of the company, then they'll have to exercise their good professional judgment to force their client to comply with true economic condition, financial condition, or to withdraw from the client.
Without regard to whether there are changes in regulations or not, if you were advising an accounting firm or if you were practicing accounting, what would you do differently tomorrow than you did yesterday?
That's a very difficult question. I'd be sure my audit procedures were very strong in these particular transactions. You know, these kinds of transactions that we're focused on here with Enron, the off-balance sheet transactions, clearly need to have economic substance outside of what the company itself has provided.
And that wasn't there in Enron.
That's the claim.
That's the allegation. Dr. Knapp, kind of finish it up for us, if you will. You're an educator. You teach people who become CPAs in the future. What should universities and colleges do in the training of these young professionals? Either what should they do differently or what should they do more of?
I think one thing that we need to do is to emphasize more of the ethics of accounting and financial reporting rather than just the technical facets. What we have now is numerous accounting rules and financial reporting standards that dictate certain disclosures and certain practices, but there's always someone smart enough to write a rule or to develop a transaction that can circumvent those rules or standards. I think that we need to focus on the substance of these economic transactions and make sure that financial statements accurately portray that economic substance rather than just the form of the transaction. So that's one thing that I try to emphasize in my classes to the students.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say we're out of time. We have a few seconds left.
All right, real quickly. Do you teach any ethics courses in the accounting department? And are there any ethics questions on the CPA exam?
Well, actually, my wife teaches at the University of Oklahoma. She's developing an ethics course for us at this point in time. And yes, there are ethics questions on the CPA exam.
Thank you.
We got to wrap it up there. Dr. Knapp, thanks for coming by. Jim, appreciate you coming back and joining us on The Verdict. Kent and I'll be right back with the final word after this. This is The Verdict.
Hello, my name is Ted Smith. I'm president of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Disability Law Center. ODLC provides free legal services in civil matters to people with physical and mental disabilities.
I'm Mike Sykes, vice president of ODLC. For more information, call 1-800-880-7755.
The Oklahoma Disability Law Center provides high-quality legal services to people with physical and mental disabilities.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
Mick Cornett and Kent Myers back to wrap up another edition of The Verdict. Kent, some final thoughts.
Enron is the accountant's worst nightmare. It's not the first, it won't be the last, but in this decade, it's likely to be one of the most significant. And it's going to be difficult for Anderson, not because they've done anything wrong. I'm not suggesting they have or have not. Don't know. It's going to be difficult for them whether they have done anything wrong or not, because even if they have done everything correctly, they're going to spend millions of dollars defending themselves. They're going to spend untold hours testifying in various places. They're going to be analyzed from every possible angle, and if they come out, as my old law partner John Swinford used to say, as clean as a houndstooth, they still will take a big financial hit and have a lot of agony over it. But it's not limited to Anderson, because just as soon as the flag goes up about Anderson, all of a sudden, as you see, there are already indications in the newspaper that other public companies are being looked at, and they all have accounting firms. And it's going to, I'm predicting, be a cottage industry for people who are trying to get something for nothing, perhaps, and go after accounting firms more than just Anderson. It's going to affect a lot of accounting firms, a lot of companies, and a lot of companies that are present in this state.
I'm sure Enron, because they were so successful, had a lot of managers and upper-level people who went to other companies. And people say, well, how was Enron so successful? And who knows where these other types of practices may be emerging in the future.
Yeah, it may rub off. Yeah. You don't know.
Well, let me remind everybody about our website. It's theverdict.tv, not .com, theverdict.tv. Thanks again to our guests, Dr. Chris Knapp and Jim Holloman. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time on The Verdict. This program was brought to you by Crowe and Dunlevy, a professional corporation. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.